Hi.
Konnichiwa, minasan.
Don't do that. Welcome to Aetheral Spake 2.9.
Aetheral Spake. Yeah, and what's the title
I
for
was,
this
I was
one?
going to say it's been a while, but it's not been a while. It's been a day.
Yeah, because you guys have been getting it every day for a while, but we last recorded probably over a week ago. No, longer than that. I don't remember.
Absolutely. So Darnell's been so sad.
I have.
Strong.
I've been
Feeling
sad.
sad?
Yeah, I didn't get to read any Aetheral Spake.
Well, here you go. I've
So-
saved your life.
Last time, if I recall, Samael, who is not Muzazi, but another special officer, landed on the planet, and he's got like an army of, they're called automatics, which I believe are like robots, and in this case, they're like robot soldiers, and he was talking to, was it Dion or Aiden? Dion. He was talking to Dion, who was like Helga's friend that traveled with Dragan, and Dion was like, I'll go get Dragan and Bruno for you, which he wasn't going to, he was lying. But Samael somehow knew he was lying, so he punished him by burning him to death. And then went on like a psychotic anime rant, and then that was the end of the chapter. Am I correct? Did I miss anything?
I don't know how much of a rant it was. He just sort of was like, don't fucking lie to me, I'll fucking kill you.
Yeah. Well, I guess rant's the wrong word, but he did like that anime villain thing where like the facial expression contorts and they say some psycho shit.
You
lied to me! I'll fucking burn you to death! Timmy! And he had like at least 10 more automatics or something coming out over the horizon. Alright, so. Yes, are we ready? Oh, the first thing in this is a dragon. There's a lot of dragons. This is another dragon, look!
Yeah, so this is canon now that there is another character in Skipper's Crew called Dragan, and he's very rarely mentioned. So every time it says Dragan, that's not a mistake, that's just that other character.
You might just want to suddenly go ahead and start looking for dragons while I
already
read.
done it.
Alright. Dragan's hands, holding his script, trembled. The viewfinder function on the device was still displaying Dion's remains, zoomed in to such a degree that he could even make out the small insects crowding over the puddle of meat. Dragan swallowed down the foul feeling rising in his throat. Wait, Dragan was watching? I thought he was like going out the back with Bruno.
They did.
Oh, so he just saw this? He killed him, he whispered, eyes fixed on the screen. He killed him for nothing. It wasn't that he had a moral high ground. Shooting people in the back when they weren't expecting it was his ultimate technique, after all. But still, he'd never murdered anyone. Never turned their corpse into a travesty. He moved the viewfinder over to look at the special officer, still yelling inaudibly and waving his freakishly long arms. Silently, he snapped a photo, saved it to the script. You'll pay for that. It was a stupid thing to think, of course. He had no way of getting payback, and he hadn't even known Dion that well. Still, it seemed certain in his mind. That damn skipper must have been rubbing off on him. This is like when Marco in part 2 of JoJo died. Joseph, like, didn't even know, but he's like, we'll get revenge, Caesar!
Bruno was fucking like doing the poses.
Yeah, that's what I was imagining. You'll pay for this, Samael. Bruno's hand landed on Dragan's shoulder, heavy but trembling just the same. We need to move, he hissed. They were just on the edge of the grasslands, where the terrain transitioned into hills covered with much longer flora. That would give them a hiding place, at least, but that didn't really solve the problem at all. Sure, they could hole up in a cave where those automatics wouldn't find them, but in a few hours Bruno and Serena would fall unconscious again, and without medical supplies on hand, it wouldn't be as pleasant to sleep as last time. He'd managed to grab some sedatives on the way out, just in case Bruno went into another frenzy, but that wouldn't help once the symptoms of Decimatus 3 started showing themselves again. On top of that, Skipper and Ruth would be walking right into a trap once they returned from getting the medicine. They had to deal with this themselves. Hadrian, Bruno said again, tugging at Dragan's arm a little more forcefully. We need to go! Dragan looked up, scanned Bruno's face, the dilation of his pupils. At most, he had 5 hours of Bruno usage left. Wow, you can tell that from his eyes? He'd have to make good use of that. Fine, he said quietly, and followed Bruno into the hills. A plan slowly began to slot together in his head, like the accumulation of clockwork. That is actually a really pleasing phrase. I don't know what accumulation of clockwork means, but that's actually really fun to read. Sedatives, Aether, Bruno, Serena. Oh my god, he's having a fucking Jimmy Neutron brain blast. All the things are running through his mind. The ruins, the special officer. He could use them. He could use them all. "You didn't have to kill him," said the leader girl, glaring silently at Zakos. Well, it's not so silent if you said something. Firely. Glaring intensely at Zakos. That was fine, however. That kind of response was appropriate for the impression the special officer gave. Apathy would have been unacceptable. Zakos smiled, dignified. "I didn't need him alive, either. I don't need to keep around the kind of filth that would lie to me. That's an untoward influence. Does the lion permit the presence of the flea?" It's so anime.
That sounds like something I would say in a Discord call if you made fun of me.
I need a minute, I'm sorry. I love the idea that Zakos talks very menacingly and kind of professionally, but then when he has his crazy rants, it's just all out. When he glanced through the crowd, their bodies instinctively cowered from his gaze. His smile spread just a tad. Oh, he was enjoying this. With the people who were supposed to be his comrades, there were always the mocking looks and the suppressed laughter. Here, though, he was getting the respect he deserved. Oh my god, is Dragan gonna do a Jotaro? True evil is those who pick on the weak for their own gain. Terror was a form of respect, after all, and the most potent. These people understood. The common folk were predisposed to fear. They understood it as their function. Only the truly exceptional could rise above that basic drive. Perhaps this white-haired girl was like that then. Hatred was only one step above fear in terms of dignity, but a step was a step. "Your name?" Zakos said, grinning. The similarity to the question he'd asked Dian Mace just before his execution was no coincidence. The lives of the common folk were conditional on the mood of their superiors, after all. Even children should know that. The girl forced the words out through clenched teeth. "Helga Malwarian!" "Helga Malwarian!" Zakos said, tasting the words. "I wonder if you'd be able to tell me where exactly the man called Skipper and his entourage are. Don't you dare try to say they're in the ruins. That would make me very angry." Helga opened her mouth to speak, but Zakos interrupted her with a pointed finger. The doctor girl in the crowd stepped forward, but a glance from Helga stopped her in her tracks. An excellent decision. He chided. "Don't try to tell me you don't know, either. I know that you know. I can spot a liar a mile away." He nodded towards the wreckage of Dian Mace, and Helga's face turned red with fury. Sorry, that spit got caught in my throat. Like a reactor, about to go critical. That was splendid. Zakos wanted to see the measure of this person, prove his superiority to her when it came down to it. That was what the supremacy was all about, after all. Victory in all arenas. "Choose your words carefully," Zakos concluded, lowering his voice until it was near a whisper. "Make sure there's something you'd be happy having written on your tombstone." A moment passed in silence, save for the rustling of grass in the wind and the distant marching of his automatics. There was whimpering from within the crowd. Zakos' brow furrowed. Did she have to take so long to answer? This was annoying. He had better things to do. "Well?" he said impatiently.
I like how he sets up this dramatic, choose your words carefully. After a minute, he's like, "Hurry up!"
Yeah, truly, you're being slothful, Helga. Helga looked up at him, still glaring as if she hoped she could still through his sunglasses.
That's been auto-corrected.
She could drill through his sunglasses with her eyes. "Skipper and Ruth Blaine aren't here," she said, voice forcing itself into a monotone to restrain the anger. "But they'll be coming back soon. I don't know who Jakob Delset is, but Bruno and Serena Delset are in the medical tent. Dragan Hadrian, too. Zakos took in a deep breath through his nose, breathed out through his mouth. The calming techniques he'd adopted while preparing for the examination still worked well. He could adjust his mood however he desired, and it never got out of control. Doubt so hard! Yeah, I love to imagine he's like doing a breathing exercise and he's like, see, I'm in control after he's burned like an acre of land already. But still, this wasn't the kind of answer he liked. Half his quarry wasn't here, and the authenticity of what was left was dubious. I see, he said slowly. I hope you're not lying to me, Helga Malwarian. I'm not that stupid. Are you not? His hands lashed out, sending twin piles of dirt flying up from where they'd just been resting on the ground. Helga stepped back, eyes widening, but she was too slow. In a second, he had her head held between his hands, keeping her in place. His grip was such that he could crush her skull with the slightest effort. Her life, too, was conditional. "Leave her alone!" screamed the doctor woman, showing the appropriate amount of fear. Zakos drank it in, smiling. This moment, here, with fate resting in his hands, it was the ideal of a special officer, the epitome of his very existence!
This man is on a constant, political speech in his head.
He ignored her. That was his right. Look at me, Helga Malwarian, he said, quietly, angling Helga's face so that she had no choice but to look directly into his eyes. Tell me you're being truthful. I'll know if you're lying. All I have to do is apply the tiniest bit of pressure, and you'll never lie again. Do you understand me? Helga winced in pain, nodded. Oh, this was splendid. He truly loved these people. He'd tried to create the scene before, on past missions, but circumstances always got in the way. He was taking the position he deserved. Say it again, he said softly, his face so close to hers. Look at me, and say it again. Now. She looked at him. Her eyes were truthful. Skipper and Ruth Blaine aren't here, she said, pained. The rest were in the medical tent. He considered it, drumming his fingers along her forehead. She was telling the truth without a doubt, but that was immaterial. Should he kill her or not? It didn't really matter what he chose. The ultimate result would be the same either way. Wouldn't the result would ultimately be the same either way?
It could both work.
All right. What mattered was that the choice was his and his alone. Slowly, he lifted her up by the skull, her feet leaving the ground. Still, she didn't flail. She didn't try to pry his hands away. She only glared at him with those wonderful, resolute eyes. Yes, this was a person who understood the way of things. He let her go, and she fell to the ground, landing in the grass with a soft thump. Immediately, the doctor ran over and began checking over her friend, running her hands over her head frantically. How touching. Losing interest, Zakos looked up and walked a distance away. The crowd appropriately parted to allow him passage. Yes, that was the way things should be. He tapped his wrist-bound script, activating direct reports from his automatics. He put the device close to his ear and spoke. Focus medical tent. Report results of search. He heard the splendid sounds of the tent being torn apart in the distance, followed by a beep from his script. With a tap of the screen, the report came through. The automatic's tinny voice was awkward and stilted, formed from a library of pre-recorded words. Search complete. Search unsuccessful. No visual match for targets. No audio match for targets. No olfactory match for targets. No tactile match for targets. Requesting permission for level 2 search. His automatics were equipped with the very latest sensory equipment, far exceeding what any human was capable of, regardless of subspecies. If they said that his quarry was no longer there, then that was true without question. Zakos bit his lip, considering his next move. He could very well turn around and punch Helga Malwarian's head off with a single punch. It just reads like a kid wrote that. I love it. He was within his rights to do that. Exceedingly within his rights. But that would not benefit his dignity. Once a man of dignity makes a choice, he should not go back on it. All decisions were final. That was the justice that Samael Ambrazo Zakos deliberated on and executed. Immutable. Excuse me. So, if you're listening to this, Lon Lang, you were asking about advice for writing characters. This, I would say, and I say this with all due respect to Tanhony, because you know I'm obviously loving this, but this is a very cartoonish and over-exaggerated example, but this is the idea of a character that has an ideal, that he bases his personality in the way he perceives the world around. Samael's ideal is very simple. The strong rule over the weak, and only the truly exceptional get to become strong. It's simple, but it spreads into every aspect of how he sees the world, how he interacts with other people, how he performs things that others might find overtly cool, because those who are of lower station don't matter in his eyes. Whereas, compared to his peers, he constantly feels insecure around them because he doesn't have power over them. So that's what I was talking about to you of, like, your character should have an ideal or essential philosophy. Not everyone in real life has one, but if you want to write a literary character with a strong presence, that's what you need to build them around. I just wanted to take a moment to set that aside, because I was talking to him about characters the other day. He put the script to his mouth again. Level 2 search permitted. Level 3 search preemptively permitted if necessary. If search is successful, begin tracking and dispatching of target elements, else return for new orders. Commencing. That was what he liked about automatics. People were splendid if you could get them properly conditioned to respect you, but there was always the risk of disrespect if they got uppity. With automatics, there was no such worry. They were efficiency itself. He smiled as the script beeped again. His assessment was proven correct so soon. The voice of his automatic rang out from his wrist. Genetic trace located. Match Dragan Hadrian. Match Jakob Delsed. Commencing tracking and pursuit. Zakos' smile spread into a jet-black grin. The hunt was on. Fetch me a chair! He barked to the gathered humanists. My legs are tired. The two of them were charging through the long grass, creating a flat trail behind them. It was unfortunate, but unavoidable. They didn't have any time to cover their tracks. Dragan's eyes were half closed. They had to be, or else the grass whipping at them would have already blinded him with the speed they were moving. The whole world was a rush of green coming towards him, the only contrast in that landscape being the form of Bruno running up ahead. Bruno had clearly had some training in this kind of escape, even with that poison in his system. His posture was rigid, his sprinting measured and exact. Some kind of military training, but not supremacy. The UAP, then? Suddenly Serena, the expression had changed, whirled around, eyes narrowed. For a moment, Dragan thought she'd taken offense to his staring, before he realized that her gaze was focused at something behind him. Her hand lashed out, violet aether coursing around it, and pulled out a large bunch of grass, the flora already forming into a flexible sword. She swung with blinding speed, the green blade lashing out like a whip. There was no time to think. Instead, Dragan threw himself to the ground, landing almost flat on his face as the sword passed over his head. Hell, he could almost feel the sword brush through his hair. The sword clashed with something behind him. From the sound of it, something metal. Dragan rolled into a ready position and looked to follow Serena's gaze. It was one of that special officer's automatics, its left arm hanging on only by a few wires. Despite its humanoid shape, it was on all fours like a dog, its glowing blue eyes inspecting them as it cocked its head this way and that, scanning them, confirming them. They'll have spread out in different directions to track us, said Bruno through Serena's mouth. If we don't take care of this one quick, it'll send out a signal to let its buddies know it's found us. Dragan nodded, readied his fists. Collections of blue aether like boxing gloves began to coat them. They charged. I really like this chapter a lot. I will say, honest criticism, Tan, because I promised you I'd give those. It felt like the hammering home of Zakos' worldview was a bit, it felt like it probably said one too many times, like, this is the way things should be. But otherwise, I really like this chapter a lot. I like the short interactions with Bruno and Serena Serena and Dragan at the end. I really like the build-up of the villain, as well as seeing Helga's attitude towards him. The interaction was really cool to set him up. What I'm expecting, my prediction, because this kind of reminds me of somewhat of a trope, but particularly the scene I'm thinking of is, this happens a lot in Parasite the Maxim. But I'm imagining a scenario where they get into a fight, And Bruno and Serena, because they're, obviously working on, what was it he injected them with? Stimulants? Using up Aether is going to tire them out quicker, and they're going to pass out. And it's going to become like a scene where Dragan is basically just trying to stall for time to protect Bruno and Serena. And it's either going to end with Dragan somehow winning, or like Dragan gets beaten to shit, and then Skipper's going to arrive at the last minute and be like, "You did well, kid. You won the psychological battle." Or some shit like that. Like with Dragan poking at Samael's mental state. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those two outcomes is what I'm expecting. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed. Tanhony, do you have a question? Or do I need to think of one real quick?
I do not have a question. Why don't you give me one?
Right, so question. By the way, I noticed you guys were responding to questions, and we have been reading them. They're so much fun. We probably won't read them like we do with comment readings, though, because of how we bulk record Aetheral Spake. But still, they're really cool, so we'd love if you guys keep them up. Question for this week. Let me think. My question is, would you... No. Okay. What would you do if you saw Samael yelling at a waitress at a coffee shop? Tell us. And you know how powerful he is.
And he's drinking coffee with 3 of his automatics.
Yeah. They're all drinking oil next to him. Would you intervene? Would you say something? Would you just cower and let it pass? Tell us how you would react. That's my question for this week.
It's a very unique one.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.